episode 4 of the Loane Hockey Podcast. And today it's a really unique episode because we're going to be talking about body position and we're going to be talking about the body positioning elements that go into the modern day game in hockey. So, a lot of body position. And when we talk about body position specifically, there's a lot of details that go into it because body position can be used in many different situations, especially in the offensive zone and the defensive zone, where it can be a situation that can create favorable space for the player looking to attack into that next sequence. So the importance of angular play is really important when we're talking about body position, how to get first contact. And if you think about coaching, for example, a lot of coaches they teach within specific angles, they teach within specific details and patterns of the play. And with body position, a lot of emphasis is on angulars and the importance of angular play. So with angles, it's important to attack at the right angle, attack at the right moment, and be able to have the right timing and have those elements incorporated be able to have good body position as well. And being able to leverage contact is so important when it comes to body position as well, because leveraging first contact, leveraging that first touch on the puck, and being able to not necessarily go puck first when you're going in for 50-50, for example, you don't necessarily want to go puck first because if you go puck first, you might have the wrong angle and it might not allow you to get a better space in that next sequence. So it might be good in the short term, but in the long term, what's really the payoff when you're going after that 50-50? So in the short term scenario, what you want to be looking after is more of how to attack based on angles and not necessarily attack the puck, but attack the defender and how to leverage that space. So how to leverage the space and then get the puck last. So thinking in opposites essentially. Because if you think from a perspective of how you get body position first and then you get the puck last, it can really allow that player to be able to leverage that next space that they get on the next sequence if they're able to get a puck retrieval out of that situation. And so a really good example for this is John Tavares of the Toronto Maple Leafs. And John Tavares is long time, for a very long time, even back with the New York Islanders when he's playing there, he's been really good and really key when it comes to body positioning elements. And a lot of it obviously comes from his lower body strength. So he's able to protect pucks easier. He's able to handle contact easier than most players because he's stronger with his lower body. He's got a better center of gravity. But at the same time, he's able to link together his lower body and upper body because he's still strong in his upper body, but he's able to link together his upper body because he can handle pucks in a variety of ways. He can shift his weight. He can maneuver from side to side really effectively, and he can do it in little subtle ways. But he does a really good job of understanding not only how to protect pucks, but how to get that first contact, how to leverage body position, how to leverage that space, and how to say if he's going in for a 50-50, like the brief example I mentioned before with Tavares, he can do a really good job of getting that body position first and then the puck last. And a lot of it is emphasized. We see a lot of it in the corners inside the offensive zone, how he forechecks. He's very angular in terms of how he forechecks. Because he obviously doesn't have necessarily a ton of speed, but he's got the mind, the state of mind to be able to understand how to leverage space when he's attacking. So he anticipates really well. He understands patterns really well. And he understands angles really well, especially going in on defenders on the forecheck. So with Tavares, it's a really good example. Another really good example is Ryan O'Reilly of the Nashville Predators. And Ryan O'Reilly is someone who his game is obviously very well rounded ever since he started his career in Colorado, and he's played on a few teams after that as well. But with O'Reilly, he's very noticeable, more so with the puck protection element. So the puck protection element, what's different in the sense of that is the body position elements. It depends on the puck skills. So when you're talking about body position and puck skills specifically, it's dependent on where you're positioning the puck, how you're using puck positioning, how you're shifting your weight, how you're able to handle pucks under contact, how you're able to handle pucks in your backhand, how you're able to maneuver in uncomfortable settings. So when it comes to puck protection, it's very key to understand how to leverage body position with the puck because the Tavares example we mentioned was mostly him without the puck and the angles that he attacks at without the puck because it's important for him to forecheck well and be able to understand the angles With O'Reilly, on the other hand, this is a situation we're talking about with him when he has the puck. And O'Reilly obviously is able to leverage his center of gravity. So what he does really well is he can plant his front foot out and he can extend his feet in a way and shift his feet positioning in a way to where he's able to hold off defenders. So if he's handling the puck to the side of him, he can allow players to do this as well. But O'Reilly especially does a really good job of it because he's really strong on his lower body and his base, and he can stick his front foot out. So that way the defender has to go around him with a stick instead of trying to poke and jab straight at him directly, which would be easier for the defender if he can go at him straight on. That forces and O'Reilly forces him to go around, which makes it much harder to the defender to try and go stick on puck. So he puts that front foot out in front of him, and then depending on the puck positioning elements, he's able to maneuver from the side and he's able to get and shift his weight directly to the front of him. And O'Reilly's really effective when it comes to doing this inside the offensive zone. He does it sometimes in neutral zone sequences as well, but a lot of it stems from his offensive zone play because he's a really key offensive contributor. Not only as a playmaker, but as a scorer as well. When you talk about the net front positioning elements with O'Reilly as well. And this is a very translatable skill at all levels. It can depend from youth because in youth hockey you don't necessarily see it as often per se, but when you advance higher up in players, there's more of an emphasis on body position from a player development perspective nowadays. So younger players are also being taught this, which is really good. But a lot of the NHL players and a lot of the players who are stronger in the lower body typically have this body position element, especially if they're not the strongest of skaters like Ferris or O'Reilly. If they're not the the fastest moving linear or moving east west, that's okay. They can still leverage body position. They can still leverage their hockey sense to outthink their opponents. So it doesn't necessarily matter if they're a bad skater, if they don't have the fastest foot speed or add acceleration gear or anything along the lines of that. It's important for them to be able to have this element and have the body position elements and the hockey sense elements. And it's a very translatable detail, not only from a scouting perspective, but from a coaching perspective and tactical perspective as well. Obviously, coaches really like to see players and have players that are able to rely on their body position because it can extend offensive zone sequences. It can get pucks out of the defensive zone easier on possessions. It can allow players to attack through the middle lane. There's effectiveness in terms of the subtle details and the subtle nuances of it that allows players to advance pucks up ice. And it depends on the situation again, but at the same time, it's really keyed upon to be able to advance pucks up and be able to rely on those positioning elements to be able to leverage possession as much as possible because that's what coaches and scouts are looking for. They're looking for players who want to drive possession and drive the bus. So body position is part of that. Body position is a part of what play drivers do really well. And being a play driver comes from subtle ways to extend offensive zone possessions and possessions in general. So when we're talking about body position, it ties back into a lot of different settings as well. And it can be used actually. Body position, this is really interesting about it. It can actually be used as more of a subtle manipulation. So we're going back to the Tavares example. Think about how Tavares is able to get body position and he can lift sticks really quickly and he can shift his weight. Mohawk, you might incorporate a Mohawk pivot or two in there, and then he can get away from pressure. So it's a really subtle way of using manipulation to be able to separate from contact because for a player who might not be as skilled with body position elements and not understanding the nuances that go into it right away, it might be harder for them to really read small area situations and they might get stripped of pucks much easier because the opposing player might do a much better job of trying to rely on body position or rely on certain angles to attack certain situations. And I also think back of an example, Sam Bennett was actually a really interesting case study at times with this throughout the 2024 playoffs. And Sam Bennett, what was really noticeable was he would rely on body position at times. It would more so be on his forechecking situations and how he's able to attack in small area settings than anything else. But what I really noticed from Bennett was how he was out thinking beforehand. So he was already thinking ahead of what he wanted to do before he even got to the situation. So it gave him an advantage already, especially against defenders who aren't as smart and cannot necessarily think the game at a higher level in the NHL. Obviously, there was a lot of great NHL defenders, but for some of those defenders who might not process the game when they get the puck as fast, Bennett, what he's able to do, he's just able to simply outthink him. He can simply outthink him by getting a body position element in there, getting first contact, and relying on angles and stuff like that. And he can really allow that to drive in terms of how he wants to attack the next play. So when he gets to that next play, he's already in a position where it's a much more suitable position for himself. And a lot of this again stems from the offensive zone patterning and the ability to understand these situations as well. And nowadays, space becomes so important when we're talking about the tactical perspective, the player development perspective, and the nuances that go into these things are so vital for so many different players. So every little detail, every little component of the game really matters a lot more as well. And being able to have body position elements can really allow players to effectively create space better and allow them to find ways to be better play drivers in subtle ways. The game back then, a lot of it was you can move north, you can move east west on entry. There wasn't a lot of gap closure from the defenders. And obviously there were some good skaters back then, but compared to now it's way different in terms of power skating, linear skating, crossovers, and acceleration speed, cruising speed, being able to attack and change gears, using edges outside and inside. Like there's a lot of different elements that are incorporated into the modern day game within skating in itself, let alone many other attributes that it's it's changed and it's evolved quite a bit. So every little detail matters. And finding, especially with the video emphasis, is how much body position can create a sustainable attack. And I think of another really good example is think about when there's an extended shift inside the offensive zone. A lot of players might be tired or they might be poking at pucks and stuff like that. But the players who can extend possession, especially if it's, say, let's say if it's a 6-on-5 where the goalie's off, it's a delayed penalty, and when that opposing team, that defending team is going to touch the puck, that's when the whistle's going to go. But the offensive team is essentially trying to play keep away. You see a lot of body position elements be relied upon in those scenarios and puck protection elements be relied upon in those scenarios to be able to try and essentially create an extended power play while the time is coming off the clock until that opposing team does touch the puck if that does happen, and usually it does pretty quickly. So those components and those little details become so much more important than those situations. Why not then are those elements being relied upon more at 5-on-5, even strength situations where, especially 3-on-3, sometimes you even see it on 3-on-3, puck protection, being able to play, keep away, be able to extend possession. Some of it's relying on body position, more of it's reliant on possession. So body position ties back into possession. So the more you can get body position on defenders, the more you can get body position on pucks and understanding those angles, the better possession sequences you're going to have. The better possession is going to be linked because of those body position elements. So there's a lot of different ways that body position can be incorporated. And again, a lot of coaches, even when they're doing an isolated skill session, depending on where they're at, in the practice, if it's off a line rush drill or if it's off an offensive zone sequence, say it's leading to a shot, sometimes the coach will rely on those body position elements to try and force the attacker to make a decision in a small isolated setting in a 1v1 setting. So the attacker is then forced to try and rely more on body position and puck protection to try and shift their weight to get off the wall, find middle ice, something along those lines. So isolated skills can become more important in coaching sessions when talking about body position as well. And again, a lot of players at lower levels are also being taught this, which is really key and a really good thing to have because yes, it's very important at lower levels. At lower levels, the game, and this is just my personal perspective, but At lower levels, the game really should be played, especially when you're talking peewee and mites and around those ages. The game should really be played in small areas. If NHL players have isolated skills in certain quadrants of the offensive zone or any zone in general, where they're doing shooting or little 2-on-2s, then surely these should be used with mites and peewees. You don't need to do full ice stuff with mites and peewees when NHL players are literally working on their game in small area 2v2s and small area 3v3s and stuff like that. So there's a lot of different components on body position can get incorporated, and the small area ice stuff is more important because to develop body position, you can't necessarily do it in full ice. It has to be developed in small areas inside the zone, so that way players are forced to think faster and they're forced to understand the game a little bit faster as well. So there's a lot of different nuances and a lot of different elements that go into body position as well.